A lot more evidence, as you'll see. But let's take a break at this point and see if, well, we'll open it for questions. Why don't we take just a few brief questions and then we'll take a break? Yes.
On your new evidence?
I'm not allowed to speak for them. John's very much aware of this. And he doesn't like people to tell you what he thinks. If you know him, you're aware of that. But how shall I put it? I can tell you that he did give me permission to say he was very impressed by this model. He is in the process of revising his Young Earth book, and he told me that he was going to include these tracks in it just recently. Or was seriously considering it, or words to that effect. He has had some opposition, and it's more a political thing, and he would say that. There was one of the key men there at ICR that's dead set against it. His explanation to me was that I don't care whether they're real or not. This is something that's like a blow to the solar plexus to the evolutionist. And we don't want to make them mad. We just want to impress them with how good work, because as a devout Calvinist, he's convinced that evidence has nothing to do with faith, which I don't think is a scriptural position. We're supposed to be able to give a rational defense for our faith, a reason for the hope that's in us, and it's based on that. But no, it has nothing to do with faith. All you'll do is make them mad, and so he says he doesn't think that ought to be used. And that is not John's position, but that's the position of some there at ICR, and have brought serious pressure to bear on John not to do this, though I think it's a battle at this point. You just need to think for yourself. Sometimes people are in positions where they can't say all they want to say. And I'll just leave it at that. Yes?
Have you guys done any studies on the distance between the human footprints to see how fast that guy was running?
Yes. It varies. The average is 26 inches, and I can walk in those steps easily. Now, at 11.5 inches, if his proportions are average, then he's 6'4". Of course, lots of short people got big feet, so we don't know for sure. But I'm right at 6 feet, and I can walk in them without a whole lot of trouble. You do see that it starts out at the lower end in a fairly normal pace, and then it stops. And that real clear first track that I said persuaded me that was destroyed, that's a standing track. You get the little dots at the end with the hourglass shape, that's a standing track. And the next one overlaps. There's no distance in between. This one is overlapping. But from that point on, they get further and further and further apart. But the average is 26 inches. Okay. Good question. All right, why don't we take a break, and then we've got a lot more exciting stuff to show you. Back to the record of the rocks. We talked about the Malachite man and then the fossil footprints there at Glen Rose. Also at Glen Rose, not in these two trails, is this Burdick track that we saw earlier. After the confidence that we gained, I believe, from understanding the Taylor Trail. And by the way, when those markings began to be seen, I mean, here was what Taylor saw when he first excavated, and then as further erosion took place, more things began to be seen that weren't seen and weren't visible. We didn't see all the dinosaur tracks initially. Just the human tracks showed up to begin with. And then the dinosaur tracks began showing up. And we didn't understand that. And I backed away as well until we got down and were able to find out what was going on. And yes, we were right both times. Dinosaur tracks and human tracks. The dinosaur tracks, especially the upper part of the trail, are slightly raised. The human tracks are depressed. And so you can tell the obvious difference. But with the confidence we gained there, we went back to look at the Burdick track. Is there a way to tell whether this is carved or not? Well, sometimes you find interior structure in a fossil. Sometimes you don't. You have to just get lucky. But we decided to section. As you can see here, this has been sawed across. The greater displacement would be at the heel, and here is the cross section at the heel. And can you see the disturbed material directly under the heel? Now, carving would cut across the contours, but if the contours follow, then obviously you're looking at a real fossil. I presented this at one of the science meetings there in Dallas, and it got kind of quiet. And then finally one of the fellows stood up and said, well, obviously this is a real track, but it must be a dinosaur track that somebody carved toes on. Just completely ad hoc. But I'm glad that he did that, because then we proceeded to test, which is the way science works, and saw it across the toes. Now, this is a real reach, because sometimes we section dinosaur tracks and find nothing. Some of you just have to get lucky. This is very fine-grained limestone and records pretty well, and sure enough, looking at a cross-section here, photographed under black light to make the structure show up and then color corrected, you can see the big toe is there, and you can actually see structures under each of the toes. If you're an engineer, you can see the load-bearing structures. We won't take time to give you that lecture, but it's extremely obvious to an engineer, especially at the great toe, where there'd be the greatest displacement. You see the following contours. And so both heel and toe then have been verified on this track that was just too good to be true. But now then, all of a sudden they're just grasping at straws. They say, well, now wait a minute, it's not too good, because you see the front is broader than the heel. That's kind of distorted, and the toes are spread out. And look, it's raised in the center, and tracks are not supposed to be raised in the center. And we didn't know a whole lot about tracks, but what do you do when you don't know? You get out and you learn. And so we decided to make some tracks. And we got some of these junior high students here to make standing tracks and walking tracks and running tracks, and we find out that they're all different and can be recognized. But this little girl was running in two directions here, and we see three tracks going away and two tracks coming toward us. Looking at the two at the end, here